Now, on behalf of our entire team and our all panelists, we welcome His Excellency.
Yes. Thank you so much, moderator. And again, thank you for inviting me to this very special program here today. Before I share some thoughts, I would like to share an experience. I actually never grew with Eastern philosophy as my foundation. I grew with Western philosophy as I grew in the Western part of the world. And it was during my late teenage years, I wondered so much about the history of my own motherland, the land of my ancestors. I decided that I will begin some studies on literature that came from my own traditions. Why should I know about Socrates? Why should I know about Aristotle, but yet not know about Adi Sankaracharya? Why should I know about other philosophies and religious texts, about the Epicureans and Stoic philosophers, and yet not know anything about the Bhagavad Gita or about the entire Mahabharata? Why should I not know about Vedas and Upanishads? And I opened the pages of the Bhagavad Gita and a commentary done by Swami Chinmayananda, and I started reading. The pursuit was first intellectual, and that was the perspective that I took. It was more academic, only to realize that the greatest philosophies that also touched the greatest esoteric psychology was found in the pages of Bhagavad Gita. It was beyond anything that I've ever read or that I've came across in my life before. And I dedicated myself to start studying this Gita no longer as a simple intellectual objective experience, but more as a subjective experiential truth, where one can understand the purpose of their very existence. When we look at Gita as a whole, we understand Gita basically in 3 words: that I am. The entire philosophy of Gita from the first verse to the last verse centers around that concept of that I am. We know in the beginning chapters of Gita that Arjuna fell in a state that was very neurotic. He had lost his mind, or as we say in the Western world, he had become insane. He started uttering questions that only recommended the divine words of the Lord that would bring some form of sensibility to insensibility. Herein, in chapter 3, is a passage where Karma Yoga is discussed. But I must admit, in the Western world, the concept of karma is very much abused. There's a much misunderstanding and incomprehension of what Karma Yoga is. The chapter starts with a discussion, more so a question by Arjuna, again in his neurotic state, about what is the difference between karma and action, that is, and gyan, knowledge. And the Lord decided to answer. When we look at verses 4 to verse 19, we see that Bhagwan Krishna pursued more of an intellectual response first before he went into the spirituality and the experiential reality of his discussion. He started, Bhagwan Krishna that is, by addressing the concept of what action means. And action was attached to the subject of the actionless, which means that it is possible to have actionless action and yet not be a contradiction in terminology, nor a contradiction in understanding. What does it then mean? In the world at which we live in the world of our objective realities, we are faced with many stimuli. Our sense organs respond to this stimuli. And if we are not in the state of awareness, then from outside in, action is then oriented, meaning that our senses then control our emotions, which then control our mind, then which control our vasanas, our desires. What then takes place is that we fall into a constant cycle of which we cannot escape, because as more desires are formed, then we engage again to satisfy the stimulus, satisfy the sense organs, satisfy the emotions, satisfy the mind. More desires are then created, more vasanas, and we continue in the cycle from age to age, janam to janam. Krishna, in addressing Arjuna, he said that one must be in that state of the actionless action. Upon the realization that we are not body, nor are we mind, nor are we intellect, but we are that unchanging reality. We are that supreme self. And from that understanding of the deeper consciousness, that divine consciousness, once the stimuli of the objective world exist, and we are able to respond from inside out, then we are able to break that cycle of the vasanas. We then establish ourselves in that state of equipoise, in that state of quietude, whereby all actions are now based on the substratum of our very being, Brahman, that I am. It is therefore possible for us to engage in that actionless action, which then means that we are not engaged in inaction, we do not do nothing, but we engage in action through our actionless state of divine consciousness, our unchanging reality. The basis of enlightenment, the basis of our God realization. These are the words that will guide us, the words of Bhagavan Krishna himself. I offer these words as we continue our journey on this path of understanding this great book, this great philosophy, this great esoteric psychology we call the Bhagavad Gita, the song of the Lord, the book of the ages. Dhanyavad.
Yeah.
Thank you again. My closing thoughts and remarks. Firstly, it was such a spirited, riveting conversation on Karma Yoga. I enjoyed it very much. Special thanks to Mr. Jan for putting me on to you, Mr. Sharma, and giving me this opportunity today. And I would like to leave a quick thought, which is basically, if we look at a flower, a rose, who looks at the rose? Which is doing the action? Is it the eyes? Is it the mind? Or is it something that goes beyond the mind, beyond the eyes? Let us engage ourselves in finding the true experiencer of the experience. We are not the object. We are the subject. Let us enter into that realm which goes beyond the mind, beyond the intellect. Experience that realism, that I am. Thank you all very much.